Today marks the 12th anniversary of that horrific event, 9/11 as it's called, which of course three very disastrous incidents that occurred on our U.S. homeland. And I was asked to talk a little bit about the experience that I had during that time, which forever stays in my mind for a number of reasons. One is the fact that the job that I had during that time, I served as the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, which pretty much put me in close contact with all of the activities and the operation that went on with the rescue and later recovery and the support operations during 9/11, primarily in the New York City area, which the Coast Guard had the major federal control of that area. The incident that comes to my mind was a few days after the planes crashed into the World Trade Center and the destruction that occurred after that. And I had gone over to the Ground Zero site primarily to not just to look at what was going on, but we had a lot of our Coast Guard personnel there. Many of them were working on the hazardous material collection information there. Just so happens that at one of those sites that I was visiting, myself and then Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Jim Lloyd, we happened upon Trinity Church. It's on Rector Street, and not very far from Wall Street. And the thing that caught both of our attentions is all around that area was just total destruction. In fact, buildings were either completely gone or were damaged way beyond recognition, that you really don't know what was there. But this church, Trinity Church, stood like nothing ever happened to it. Now, of course, there was debris all in the area, tons, and I'm not exaggerating on the weight of the material. It was tons of material, mostly from the World Trade Center debris. But all that was damaged in the church was a broken window. So as we walked around the churchyard, which also included some gravesite, the father of the Coast Guard, Alexander Hamilton, happens to be buried there. Admiral Lloyd looked at me and said, you know, in a couple of days when things kind of slow down a little bit, how about getting the Coast Guard guys up here to clean up the graveyard? So I said, yes, sir. I mean, I kind of looked at it and said, well, gosh, we got a lot of other things going on, Admiral, but, you know, you just say yes. So I contacted the Command Master Chief of Coast Guard Activities, New York, soon afterwards, and said, get a team of about 20 people to come up and start cleaning up the yard there. There's a lot of big debris that requires heavy-duty equipment to move. I mean, there were steel beams, there were all kinds of things that were around there that you needed a lot of heavy lifting to make some of the cleanup work happen. So the Command Master Chief of the Coast Guard Activities, New York, said, aye, aye, Master Chief, and then off he went. A few days later, I'm back in Washington, D.C. in my office. I get a phone call from Senior Chief Steve Prohl was his name. And he says, Master Chief, when are you coming back up to New York? I said, well, I can come back up anytime. And of course, during that time, there was no air transportation, but however, essential personnel like myself was able to get access either through a Coast Guard or National Guard aircraft to get up in the area. So I says, well, I can come up there in a couple of days. He said, can you come back right now? I said, what do you mean right now? I got other things going on. He says, Master Chief, I cannot tell you over the phone what just happened here. You're going to have to come up here and see it. So I said, all right, see what? The church, Master Chief. You got to see the church. I said, okay. So through some channels real quick, I was able to get a helicopter to take me up to New York within a couple hours after that call. And I arrived in New York, and Senior Chief Crow met me, and we moved on over to where the Trinity Church and the Ground Zero site was. But to my amazement, I found the church property was pristine. I mean, there's no way to even exaggerate the thought of that, which I understand why Senior Chief Cole couldn't tell me over the phone what I needed to see. Everything was cleaned. There were mountains of trash bags. Oh gosh, they stood maybe 10, 15 feet high, way off to the side on the street of debris that was gathered. And I'm saying, wow. So I asked the Senior Chief, I said, well, how did this happen? He said, well, Master Chief, you'll never believe this. When I brought about 20 guys over, we started cleaning, and as we started picking up things, and there were people all around who were working on the damaged sites, and they were doing all kinds of other things, mostly recovery operations. But they stopped what they were doing, and they all came over to the church and started helping. He says, within an hour, he says, you couldn't walk because it was just crowded with people working there. He said he couldn't give me a number of how many people were there, but he said it was in the hundreds. And before too long, the church was clean, inside and out, but primarily the outside part. It was probably a remarkable achievement to see just how terrible it looked. And I wish I could have a picture to show you what it looked before as well as after. But we actually had a ban on cameras. There was only certain authorized cameras allowed during that particular time for obvious reasons. So I didn't have any pictures to show that. So I went inside the church and I talked to the vicar of the church, and he again sort of re-emphasized about what happened and how just overwhelming of seeing this particular achievement occur. So what it did in the end, it just tells us that how the worst brings out the best in people, how death and despair brings out hope and faith in the future.